let's look into the brushes. The brushes in ZBrush are the most powerful brushes in all of 3D when it comes to sculpting. You only need a very few of them to really get the majority of work done, so it can be a bit confusing. But once you've found the brushes you like to use, you're never really going to be switching away from them. I've been using the same brushes for like 10 years now in ZBrush because they just work really well. The way we bring up the brush menu is we hit the B key, and now you can see all the brushes. We can also go up here as well, and now we can set this is exactly the same thing. We have the exact same menu. So if we hit the B now, and we want to, let's say we want to have the clay brushes, clay buildup, we can now just click on it here. Or we can make this a bit quicker as well. So in order, let's say you don't know exactly where it lives, we can use a hotkey system, which is pretty unique to ZBrush. So we know it's called clay buildup. So let's try to filter by C, filter by all the clay brushes. So now we have all the clay brushes here. And now you can see that there's a B next to it. That means if we now hit the B key, now we get this brush. This is not alphabetical or anything like that. They're just trying to find something which kind of sounds like the brush. In some cases, this is impossible. But for something like clay buildup, this makes sense. It's B for brush, C for clay, and B for buildup. So now if you want to do this quickly, we can do B, C, B. And now we have the clay buildup brush. In the accompanying PDF, we listed down all of this as well, just to make your life a bit easier. But now we have successfully switched to the clay buildup brush. If you want to have the standard brush, this is B for brush, S for standard, and T for the standard, in standard, I suppose. So it's down here. Now you can hit the T key. This is, again, one of these things, it does become quite intuitive after a while as well. I personally hotkey my brushes in a different way, which we are going to look into in a different way, in a different chapter. But I also recommend that you learn the default way of working with the brushes. This is super handy if you ever have to work on somebody else's computer. Now you can still operate ZBrush without your crazy custom setup. So the default brush we're going to be looking at now is the standard brush. Standard brush is a really nice brush, and it's really good for if you want to have like specific details in here. You want to really go in and really have some very specific and sharp, good lines. It's not like it's not like one of these magical brushes. It's just a good brush which does its heavy lifting when it needs to. So let's look into how we can actually work with the brushes. So we change the brush size by hitting the S key. This is very important. You're going to be using this a lot. You really don't want to go up here all the time to the interface item. You just hit the S key and you just start moving this up and down right away. Hit S and then you start dragging it. So very nice and easy. If we want to do the opposite, like we said before, the Alt key is generally the opposite of everything else. So let's try to sculpt regularly. And let's try to sculpt regularly by holding down the Alt key. Now you can see that this carves into it. So we have two modes up here. We have C add and C sub. This is what the default behavior of the brush is. If it's set to C add and we sculpt, it's going to actually add geometry to it, or it's going to be adding depth to it outwards. And if we set this to C sub, we're going to be carving into it. Some brushes are set to C sub by default, some are set to Z add. So this will just do the opposite. Needless to say, or to keep it short and sweet, sculpt normally, hold down, just sculpt with the tablet, and to carve in, you hold down the Alt key. If you want to smooth out something, you can go just zoom to the area you want to go, and you can hold on the Shift key. The Shift key will just destroy all the form. This will just simplify your model drastically. So you can see it actually switches to a different brush. So we have a smooth brush as well. This is just mapped to the Shift key. So real nice and easy, just hold down the Shift key to smooth it out. We can change the intensity of the brush by hitting the U key. This will set the C intensity up here as well. So let's set this to 100. You can see how intense it is now. And let's set this to like 2. And you can see how you can barely see anything at all. And what intensity you want, there isn't a right or wrong one here. It just depends on your need. Now we just made him like a nice little French mustache. Pierrick the monkey. Just hit Ctrl-Z to undo that. We can also enable symmetry as well by hitting the X key. This is a really useful feature you should just start getting used to right away. So if you're not going to be sculpting stuff by hand like this is too much work. So instead of sculpting both sides, we just hit the X key and we can just sculpt both sides like this. You can also find the symmetry under transform, and you can find it right here as well. So just activate symmetry. You can also have this set to Y and the Z key, or to the Z axis. For the majority of your work, you will only be dealing with the X axis, just meaning it's going to go from left to right here. In some cases, you do also want to go up and down, but those are some very specific cases, and most likely you will never deal with that when dealing with at least like organic characters like this. So now that we understand how we can actually work with the brush, let's look into the brushes we are going to be dealing with the majority of our time. So like we just saw now, the first one here is the standard brush. The next one is going to be inflate. So this is B for brush, I for inflate, and then N for, I guess, the N in inflate. The inflate brush is going to technically, from a technical point of view, it's going to push every polygon along its normal. From a more colloquial point of view, it's going to do this. It's going to fatten stuff up and give you like a nice cauliflower boxing ear like this. It just adds volume to whatever you're sculpting at. So if you want to really like add volumes to things, this is something you often want to do. You want to make certain areas thicker, you can do that. Or like we said, hold on the Alt key and it's going to get thinner. So does crazy things if you have big wrinkles, but this is going to thin things out like this as well. So I don't use this a whole lot with the Alt, but you can do it as well. But the majority of the time, I just use to fatten things up like this. Like you really just want some more volume in these wrinkles. You can just go over it and do this. Or like if an arm is too thin, you can quickly go over and just quickly increase the volume of the arm. The next up, this is the brush I'm using for the vast majority of my time when sculpting. This is the clay buildup brush. This is one we briefly looked at before. B, C, and B. And here we have the clay buildup brush. If you just hit the S key to set the size down, you can just see what this is doing. This, if you just keep sculpting now in one point, it's just going to add volume forever to this point. So eventually you're going to reach a point where like the geometry just like explodes like this, and it looks terrible. So you definitely want to make sure that you keep this, like you just don't keep on sculpting like one point. But this is a really powerful brush because it just allows you to have this really organic and nice feeling when you're sculpting. Now, I find that the default setting is a bit too harsh for me. Like it has too much of a brush stroke in it. You see here that it has a very harsh alpha to it. So what we can do, well, there are two things I prefer to do with this. Either I go in here and I just disable the alpha. You can just click on the square and then you click alpha, and then we can just go over it now, and now you can see that it's a way softer brush. So we can just really go in and just define where the shapes are now in a very soft and nice way. I find this to be a bit too soft though, so what I prefer to do, I prefer to use the Alpha 06, which is kind of like an in-between. It still has some hardness, but it doesn't have the real brush strokes. It doesn't have the really intense clay strokes like this. So this is how I prefer to work. The vast majority of all the work I've done, like both for film and for personal work and all flip normals, you're going to be seeing that we are dealing with the vast majority of the time just with this exact setup. So what's cool about it is you can really just get these really soft shapes like this, or you can make a smaller brush and harder intensity, and you can get these very specific shapes. It means that you have so much control over your sculpt with this brush that I really don't use the smooth brush. Let's say we have some really harsh shapes here, right? You might be tempted just to smooth them out like this, but hold down the shift key. But let me show you how you can actually just smooth this out very easily just using the clay brushes. You just work over it like this with some soft strokes. You do require a lot of practice to get this right. And then you just use a softer and softer stroke. You can hold on the Alt key as well to really define it a bit. And you can just keep going over it like this. Then you can set the intensity way down, hit the U key, or go up here and just set it down. And you can just work over the shapes as well. So this will just give you definition in your sculpt without it being blurry. Like you might have like good, nice soft shapes, but they're not going to be blurry shapes. The difference is that this here is, if I just were to smooth it now, then you get blurry, undefined shapes. But now with the clay builder brush, I'm getting defined and soft shapes, which I am controlling. So that's my favorite brush of all time in ZBrush. Then we have the clay brush. The clay brush is identical to the clay builder brush, apart from the fact it doesn't build up, which I guess makes sense. B, C, and L. So brush, clay, and clay. So this is the same thing, just that it doesn't have, there's no alpha on it, and it also doesn't build up. So if you just were to sculpt now, you're just getting this flat surface. This is also a really nice brush and can be used for a bunch of different things. If you prefer this or the clay buildup, that's really personal preference. I used this for years, and then I switched to a clay buildup brush, and they're not better than one isn't better than the other at all. They're just different brushes. You can also set this here to have a really harsh alpha. You can use this. Now you get that really nice and kind of in between thing, or you can get a really harsh alpha like this one, and get like these really nice brush strokes. Then we have probably the coolest brush of them all. This is the Dam Standard. B, D, and S. So the Dam Standard brush, it allows you to get really, really nice creases and wrinkles. So if you want to go over your model and you start with like a soft pressure like this, and you get a hard pressure, and then you get a soft pressure and hard pressure again, you can just see how you get these really beautiful lines in your model. This is like the perfect scar and wrinkle brush, or just definition, whatever it is you might want to do. If you just want to define this shape a bit more, make it sharper, you would just go over and just work it up with the Dam Standard brush. And like with all the other brushes, hold on the Alt key and it goes the other way. So you can see you get these really nice sharp lines. So if you want to make this guy a bit more alien, you can do like these nice ridges like this, or we can do like hold down the Alt key and just drag where you want it like the spikes to go, and you get these really nice and like alien spikes on this nice chimp's head. Then we have the Trim Dynamic brush as well. Trim Dynamic is fantastic. This is B, T, and D. And this is kind of like a brush you use early on, where you just want to get the planes down. This is going to simplify a model way down, and this is going to remove all things, which is nice and soft. The reason you want to use this brush is to really simplify a model, because when you're sculpting, it's so easy that you just get all these small little plane changes and a lot of noise. So by doing this, you can just really get these nice planes like so. This is also fantastic when it comes to environments. If you want to make nice rocks, this is just ZBrush to go with that. You can see now we get this like a nice chisel chimp. So I would really use this early on. I would definitely not use it at this stage of the model, because this is now I'm just destroying the form. But if you are early on, I really recommend that you go over with the clay buildup, also with the Trim Dynamic brush, and you're just defining all the planes. Really control all the planes of your model. I can guarantee you your model is going to get better. And then once you have this nice soft result like this, then you can go over it with the clay buildup brush, B, C, B, like this. And then you can start to like soften out and refine it and really just work up the strong volumes you just created with the Trim Dynamic brush. Then we have a brush we're going to be using also a lot. This is like one of the universal brushes. This is the Move brush, B, M, and V. So with the Move brush, we can move stuff out like so. So this is not like the other brushes, because it doesn't really add volume when you're sculpting. This is you hold and you drag where you want to go. You got to make sure the intensity here is pretty high, because otherwise it's not really going to do what you want it to do. If it is set to something super low, it's going to have like a delay on it, or it's just going to be lagging, and it's not really going to do anything you want. This can be nice if you want really subtle changes, but most of the time you want this to be set to something like 100, where you can just very quickly go in and just change the design. This is a brush I use a lot, particularly early on in the sculpt, where I'm really just going in and I'm just refining the volume of the sculpt like so. Then we have the snake hook brush. The snake hook brush isn't directly useful, at least at this stage, but is very handy when it comes to concepting out shapes. And we will have a more specific look at that later on. But let's just have a quick look now. This is B, S, and H for brush snake hook. And this allows us to really quickly just drag out all these crazy shapes. So you see beginners and ZBrush, they're often just doing this, where they just discovered a snake hook brush and they're just going absolutely nuts. But it's one of these, like, remember, with great powers comes great responsibility. Just because you can something doesn't mean you should, because now you get all these weird pasta-like creatures like this. But it can also be incredibly powerful. It's really a good concept tool. Now here you can see an example where you might want to smooth your model down. Like here, it keeps just breaking the polygons. So now you can just hold in the shift key, and then you can just smooth it out to distribute the polys a bit better. Then we also just need to look at a feature called backface masking. If we are now using the clay brushes now, and we have a really soft area like the ear. Let's see if we can replicate this. So what often happens when you work in a really soft area like this is it will keep going through the model. So here you can see like I'm actually sculpting, like I reach a point and then I'm just sculpting through the model like this. And this is really nasty and it can cause all sorts of issues. So how do we solve this? Well, if we go on the brush settings over here, and this looks a bit intimidating because there are so many settings. If we go all the way down here to auto masking, we have a setting here called backface masking. Backface masking just means that you can't sculpt through. So if this is enabled now, there's no way for us to actually sculpt through or like influence the other side. Like you might sculpt through because the volume is just actually going through it, but it's not going to destroy the other side like it was doing before. So I highly recommend you that you use, for thin surfaces, that you use backface masking a lot. One thing to note as well in ZBrush is that all brush settings are brush specific. So if you enable backface masking on this is not a global change. The standard brush doesn't have backface masking because of this. And it also means whatever intensity change you do, it's not going to impact the other brushes as well. One thing we should look at as well is the focal shift. So if we set this all the way to 100, you can see how soft or so how hard our brush becomes. And if we set this all the way to 100, you can see how incredibly soft it is. There's barely anything going on whatsoever. To 0, compare 0 to minus 100, and you're just seeing how incredibly different these two strokes are. One is way harder than the other. In general, what setting you want depends on personal preference and also what kind of brush it is you want as well. But yeah, definitely play around with the focal shift. You can get some really cool results. It's really interesting sometimes when you just set it to like full on minus 100 and you get these incredibly textured results like this, which is really cool. A bit overkill, but it's a bit more stylized. If you're going for something which is like very raw in a sculptural form, you might want to use this. Like if you're doing like a full on clay statue or it's going to be printed or whatever it might be. You want to express yourself. So in short, we only use a few brushes. The brushes we're going to be dealing with the vast majority of the time would be the clay builder brush, the move brush, and the damn standard brush. Like with those 3 brushes, you can really do the vast majority of your work. If you want to add some other ones to the mix, then you have the smooth brush, the inflate brush, the clay brush, a snake hook, a trim dynamic, but the vast majority of the work can be done with really 2 or 3 brushes. And once you really master how to use those or you're comfortable with them, then you can sculpt anything. So don't go searching online for the best ZBrush brush for sculpting. No, the ones we have are really good. If your sculpts aren't looking good, it's not going to be due to the lack of brushes in ZBrush. You have too many brushes here. It's worth experimenting with. There are a bunch of really cool ones, which are in ZBrush here. There are a bunch of really interesting ones, but we kind of pre-filtered for you. So if you stick to the clay buildup, you're going to be fine forever in your entire career using ZBrush.